Hello, everyone, and welcome to Show Hoppers. Today we have something very exciting in store for you. I am Mr. Sal, a high school science teacher, joined as always by my co-host, former student, and buddy for fancy frolicking, Kirt. Kirt, how are you?
Well, Mr. Sal, I'm pretty excited. I think you know why.
Flonking A right, I do. It truly is our privilege to welcome creator, writer, producer, director, composer, animator, and star of Centaurworld, Nicole Dong. Hi, Megan.
Hi, that was delightful.
Oh.
You guys have really watched the show.
Mr. Sal way more than me, but
Thank
yeah.
you for that. I was really, that's a, you guys have a lovely intro.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I have seen the show. Now, I should tell you, I have young children. I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, my Sonneltons, and they do call me They do call me Daddleton, by the way.
Oh my
God. But
That's amazing.
So yeah, it is. And we've watched the show between the times that they've watched them and the times that I've actually sat down to have a dedicated watch of it. I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times. Kurt's only seen it the once, but
Oh wow.
yeah. Well, when you have little kids, they're going to watch what they watch and you're going to absorb it regardless whether you want to or not. Now, I did want to in this case, so
That's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm glad it was a voluntary experience and you weren't just sort of dragged into it.
Well, I had a really interesting point of entry into the series. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on when I have a question that I want to ask you about that. But
Okay.
it was not necessarily a linear consumption of the series at first.
Okay.
So at any rate, so most of your credits, Megan, up to this point have been in the animation and art departments on most of the shows and movies that you've worked on. But on Centaurworld, not only did you work in the art department, but you also produced, you wrote, you directed. I think you composed the music. Is that right? Or some of it?
Yeah. I wrote maybe a little over half of the songs, and then my co-EP, so basically my co-captain,
Yep.
he wrote a lot of the other ones, and then we co-wrote some together. So I wrote a bunch of the music, and then we also had a separate composer, a really amazingly talented individual named Toby Chu, who produced all the songs for us and also did the score.
Oh, great. That's great. And you starred in this as well. So you had a lot of roles. For those of you who don't know, listeners, Megan was the voice of Glendale on the show, among others. If you had some other voices, I think you were one of the Glitter Cats, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And to what you were saying about me being in the art department,
Yep.
in my previous, I guess my background in animation was primarily in storyboarding, which includes a lot of writing in animation, depending on the kinds of productions that you're on. So I did storyboarding, which involved a lot of writing in it, and then some directing too. So there was already some stuff that I'd done before that kind of helped prepare for this kind of a role.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's outstanding. So of all of these roles that you had on this show, which one did you enjoy the most?
I think I really loved the fact that I got to wear so many hats, or the fact that I got to do so many different things the most. But I'm a huge musical theater lover and a huge fan of musical theater. I know I've told the backstory before, but kind of the inspiration for Centaurworld was, being in high school and expecting to be in a different class, and then ending up being in show choir because it was the only available elective that fit into my schedule. And initially being really overwhelmed by it because I was, more introverted and a little socially anxious. And I wasn't used to being silly and goofy and singing in front of other people so much. And that ended up being a really transformative experience for me. And I ended up kind of going towards the arts, and music was a big part. Music and musical theater was a huge thing for me growing up, and getting to do something that was a musical, and getting to write and structure it and do all the things that I incorporate all those things that I love about musical theater into a series was the most exciting part of it for me.
Oh, that sounds great. I mean, and it sounds very familiar to maybe the main character in this series. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Excellent. Is there a role that you had on Centaurworld that you hope you never have to do again?
Oh gosh.
All of them. No.
No.
I no, it was I would say that there are always some sorts of parts of the process that is uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but I always try to look for those new experiences as a part as learning or something just to experience growth from. So I actually wouldn't say there was anything that I really hated from the process or anything that I
Great.
wouldn't want to do again, except I will say that doing the kind of Elizabeth Holmes voice was shockingly difficult on the vocal
Really?
cords. That was one where like I used to do that voice as a joke kind of, and then but then having to do it in the same day as surprisingly it was harsher on the vocal cords than doing the regular Glendale voice, which sounds like I'm gargling glass already, but yeah, like just kind of doing that really low voice was actually really tough. Where after
Wow.
like the next day I was like, oh man, that was uncomfortable.
And that was harder than the normal Glendale voice.
Yeah, weirdly enough, because that day, because that episode has so many Glendale lines, it was such
Yeah,
a
that's
Glendale
true.
heavy
Mhm.
episode, and
Hmm.
so I had to go from doing the Glendale voice into that Elizabeth Holmes voice, and then
Hmm.
we just kind of recorded it straight through. Sometimes we'll have you know the actor record the music first or whatever their preference is, but we just kind of
Hmm.
went straight through, and then having to sing after doing this sort of deep thing with the voice was actually pretty tough. Like I felt like I'd gotten a workout.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. We did want to ask you, can you talk about the choice to draw the parallel between Glendale and Elizabeth Holmes here?
Um, I mean, Elizabeth Holmes was a character that was just so interesting in general. I think we talked about her a lot, and Glendale is a character whose morals are, you know, as with many of the characters in the show, she's kind of gray. Some of the things that she does are, is not really what you'd want as imitatable behavior. And Elizabeth Holmes was a person in the public eye, and her situation was one where she divided our writers' room a lot too, because
Oh.
I think we all agreed that what she did was terrible, and that she's probably she's got a lot of issues, and what she did was terrible. And yet we were
Mhm.
also torn because we were like, what she did was also the same as a lot of her male colleagues, what a lot of her
Mhm.
male colleagues have been doing for years. So,
Uh-huh. Mhm.
so it actually inspired a lot of debate. And I think, I think it was just when we were talking about Glendale doing a TED talk, we immediately thought of having her do Elizabeth Holmes.
Well, it was
Speaking
pretty
of,
brilliant.
yeah, no. Speaking of Glendale, though, so she has kleptomania, and that's the big
Yes,
part of her character.
yeah.
So why did you choose to have a character in like a family series? You're taught not to steal, but Glendale
Mhm.
constantly steals. So why'd you decide to put that on display?
I think that we wanted to have a bunch of characters, especially for our herd, characters that all had different sorts of flaws. Most of our characters embody like different coping mechanisms for trauma. And what we loved about this little family that we created, I guess, was the idea that these characters were going to have flaws, some flaws that probably should be corrected, but we weren't going to show them correcting those things. They were going to just sort of accept each other for
Mhm,
their flaws, no matter how big. And that wasn't going to be the focus of the show. But
mhm.
we were just going to, have a group of characters that really just accepted one another in spite of their flaws. And in Glendale's case, I mean, she's literally a criminal.
Always the other thing. Sometimes for the benefit, like the key. You know what I mean? Sometimes it works out.
Yeah, it helps.
Oh, that's great. Just to put a bow on Glendale here, there's something that I have always wondered about Glendale, and that
Mhm.
is, so in the song Portal Tummy and Me, Glendale says, I don't have a dad or mother. Well, maybe I did before. And then her portal tummy burps. So she
Mhm.
also says to Wamawink that you should just go. Everybody else does. So did Glendale portal tummy her parents, or did they abandon her because they were scared of her?
um, so yes,
You don't.
I
You can
always
give a
imagine that
vague answer if
Glendale
you want.
did. I won't be vague.
Okay.
Oh,
I'll
sweet.
be upfront. Yeah, there was like I had written like a bullet point. Like there was a scene, if the final movie, if episode 8 of season 2, if it was longer, there would have been a scene where Jebri would have stumbled upon her parents in the portal tummy too.
Wow.
Because yeah, her parents are in there. We implied it, but we didn't get to explore it further. But in my mind, her parents are definitely in there.
Oh, that is brilliant. I love
I
it.
wonder, like, if her parents have the portal tummy power, and then like is weird thing now.
I imagine that they, I mean, like they have a TV, they have, you know, yeah, I don't know, they're in there somewhere, but I don't think, in my head, they kind of don't remember how they got there, and they don't fully know where exactly they are anymore. So yeah, it's a little bit dark, but a lot of the things in our show kind of rode that line of being kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Oh,
and that was one of them.
But that's what we love about it so
That's part of the
much,
charm,
too. It's yeah. So I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. That is unexpected. Yeah. So that's great. That's great.
Well, I guess back to your background a bit more, right? So you wrote a lot of songs in the series with Dominic Bizignano. He wrote a lot of them as well. Which of those songs are you most proud of? Like, not maybe you didn't like it the most, but you get the most pride in terms of making it.
Yeah. The Breathe in a Bag was definitely one that I think was one of the most challenging ones to write, and I do feel some pride in having finally cracked that one, because that was tough for me, weirdly, because I was writing it for my own character, but also because like I knew thematically it was something about anxiety, and yeah, I which is something that I do personally struggle with on some level. So it felt personal, it's a big topic, and it was for the character, so I felt a lot of pressure writing that one. But yeah, like it was one that I ended up feeling really proud of. And then Becky Apples, I think, if not for just the fact that I got to rhyme, you know, schmuck with Becky, how you like them apples, because I think your apples suck. Then, yeah, I wrote all the songs for episode 1 too, from the whole series. So like getting to write Rider's Lullaby and Hello Rainbow Road, and some of those songs that came back as leitmotifs, you know, where we reused some of those themes later throughout the series, kind of writing those foundational songs. There's something about kind of having done that in isolation. I'd written the songs for that episode before we had a crew, before Dominic was there, before you know, before there were other people. So yeah, that was kind of a special experience, just kind of doing these crappy piano demos by myself in a weird building in Hollywood when we were just starting, because that was also when Netflix didn't have like they were just getting their animation studio started too. So we were in this really janky building, and they were building offices around us, and it was like a really and it was really fun. It felt like being back in art school or something, because there was sort of these weird cubicles, and it felt like a startup. And there was something about casual vibe. Energy. Yeah, it was just sort of, it had such a it wasn't really casual so much as it was like they were physically building building things around us, and then they were also building a studio at the same time. And so I was there, and then there was, you know, people directing. There were Chris Williams was directing a movie, and his office was right next to mine, and Jorge Gutierrez was working on Maya and the Three, and his office was up the hallway. They just had like a hallway, and there were all these people, all these creators, kind of just initially developing their stories, and it was everything from preschool to adults to you know, some of the features, and then those of us making series. And it was just such a fun, exciting time, and we would share stuff with each other. And so yeah, writing the music for that first episode in that space, and kind of we would have to sometimes record like I remember recording vocals in like these whisper pods that they had, like these little glass whisper pods. And Dominic did that too later when he came on, because we were in like an open floor plan. So we would have to just kind of go in there and be singing, with other people working in cubes around us. And it was really awkward,
Yeah.
but it felt kind of more punk rock in that way. It's sort of like, yep, we're going to make this.
Do what you gotta do. Yeah.
We'll do whatever we got to do. So
that's cool.
Well, it's go ahead, Kirt. Sorry.
Oh no. I was supposed to say the last like bit of background to ask was just, in terms of your background art and animation, how did that influence how you wrote Centaurworld compared to what a traditional writer may have done, writing any animated series?
Well, I think because I think the main thing that made it different was the fact that it's a musical series, and I think there are a lot of shows that have music in them, in animation, and in most cases, I think someone else usually writes the music. There usually is a separate composer or someone else. But the fact that we were going to we knew that we wanted at least 3 songs per episode, and we wanted the music to be narrative. And so that was very different for the writing process, because that meant that the songs were not just going to be like, and now there's a random dance break, or now there's just going to be a random part where everyone starts singing. But that meant that, and the fact that Dominic and I were writing the music, I think that was always like a big challenge. So the way we did it was we kind of outlined the whole thing, and Dominic and I were in the writer's room from the beginning. And I posted it on Twitter, I think, but there was we basically had these big boards, and we had the whole series listed out with Post-it notes and cards. And then there was a row in the bottom that was tiny little Post-it notes, and those were all the songs. And we knew from the beginning, oh God, we're going to have to write, at least 50 something to 75 songs.
Oh, wow.
And so from the beginning, we, as scripts were being written, we were writing songs, and then we would go with the writers, make sure that these fit into the scripts. There were no redundancies, and that so it was always very collaborative. We were always talking. And even the way that we wrote, Megan McCarthy was our story editor, and she was on My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and has a lot of experience being a story editor. And her way of working was the writer would write the first draft by themselves, and then we would while myself or Dominic was writing demos, and then we would table read it as a group and kind of write that second draft together, so it felt cohesive, so that all of us were rewriting, all of us were writing as a group for each episode. And then meanwhile, we would be playing or singing or playing our rough demos, and it felt really fresh every time we were doing that. And it felt like we were kind of it felt more unified for a show that is so off the wall and has so many different tones and themes going on. It was the thing that was allowed us to have it feel cohesive. But it was, I think, having the music be such an an integrated part of the storytelling presented that challenge. So what would happen is we would write these demos, and then we would send them to our composer. And composers usually come in later, usually in post-production, but our composer came on in pre-production. And so we would give him these demos where we were singing, and we, in my case, I usually had some very basic piano or something really rough, of maybe a ukulele or something. And then he would take it and fully produce it. So he would create all the instrumentation, and he was so involved in the narrative of it too. The best example of that was in the tree shaman episode, in episode 4, when they're in the forest. He created percussion out of he and his assistant went to Home Depot. Toby and his assistant Bryce, who was also amazing. They went to Home Depot and they got wood, and then they went and got bags of dried leaves, and they made shakers out of dried leaves. And some of the percussion is actually wood being bent, or them chopping wood.
Oh,
so
wow.
So he really got into it. Or sometimes we would just have these discussions about the tone or like what was happening in the story. And then he would be like, well, you know, for like the tornado, for example, in episode 2, I think we were talking about like what woodwinds and what sort of, you know, like also we got really nerdy about like what instruments would best represent a tornado. But yeah, having that influence very early on was really great, where there could be all this dialogue about the texture of it. And having produced songs for our storyboard artists to work with was also amazing, because it was so inspiring for them to hear like these, you know, like this very instrumentally rich music. And then after we were done with that, he went back and did the whole thing again, but basically did the score. So he'd already like helped us with the composing and producing all this music. And then he went back through the beginning and did the score for it for post-production. And so like that was also really, really awesome, where it just again feels, you know, like he was as much a part of the storytelling as everyone else was.
Okay, so you know, like interconnected. So it's more interconnected than the typical writing style of an animated series, would you say? Like more cross dialogue?
It was, yeah, it felt like there was a lot of cohesion, or there was a lot of different departments working together and problem solving. The other thing that was different was because we had 2 worlds, we actually had 2 different animation studios doing the 2 styles. So we had Red Dog Culture House, who I think a lot of those guys had animated on like Avatar and Korra and shows like that. And they did like the stuff in Rider and Horse's world, like the first, you know, at the very beginning and most of those scenes. And then Mercury Filmworks in Canada did most of the Centaurworld stuff. But because we knew that we were going to have, you know, characters going back and forth, especially as we got into season 2, we had more of that. They had to, you know, like we would have times when the studio that specialized in more of the serious anime style would have to animate Comfortable Doug or some of the, you know, the horse when she's wibbly wobbly.
Right.
So kind of problem solving all of that too was interesting. Because
It
that
sounds
like, yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a hootenanny.
It was a hootenanny. It was a creative hootenanny, because we had two studios in like opposite ends of the earth, kind of having to, you know, share information. Like, you know, like how are you guys drawing these really round, bouncy characters? Yeah, it was really great.
That's outstanding. But before we start digging into some of the themes and more characters, I have a question here. It's a recorded question from my wife, Leslie. She's a teacher, a musician, illustrator, and artist. And listeners, if you want to check out her Instagram, it's Leslie Kubica Illustration. But anyway, she has a question for you about kind of the initial spark of Centaurworld. So Kirt, can you play that question?
Hey, Megan. It's nice to meet you. I was wondering, what came first in your process when you started developing Centaurworld? Was it the music, a song, or was it a character, or was it maybe part of the story? What was the spark? I know when I develop stories, there's always that spark, like that initial idea, and it's so exciting, or maybe it's not. So what was it for you? And was it exciting, or was it just like a random thing that you wrote in one of your notebooks or something like that? I'm looking forward to your answer. Thanks.
That is an excellent question. That's such a well thought out question. And I love talking about process too, because I know it's different for everybody. And so the first character that there's kind of 2 parts to that answer.
Okay.
The first character I ever drew from Centaurworld was Derpleton, and it was like, gosh, like 7 years ago, maybe.
Wow.
I think I had maybe drawn him on a chopstick holder at a restaurant, and a restaurant called Daichon in Studio City, which is great. They're family owned and they're lovely, and they started keeping the drawings I left there. Actually.
Oh wow!
So I think Derpleton's still somewhere in there from like a while ago. And then I would draw him I would sometimes post him on Instagram just as like I used to draw comics about these weird mermaids, just a different species, like seahorse, pregnant male seahorse mermaids and other things. And then I started drawing centaurs. I love, I love animals. I love biology. And I just thought it was really funny to draw centaurs that weren't just horses, that anything can be a centaur, right, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I used to just draw this giraffe guy who was kind of buff because he made me laugh. But then I started drawing Wamawink, and then I just started thinking about this as a world. And then I drew a picture of just a regular old horse standing there staring at Dirpleton. Oh. And I'm sure I can probably send you a picture of it later after this. But
really?
But yeah, I have it. I have a photo of it somewhere. And I drew that picture, and that was kind of the spark where I thought it would be really funny if there was like this could be a show. Somehow I knew I wanted to make a musical, and then I started relating it to my own experiences, because I thought for this show it can't be it has to just be a regular horse, but also maybe a tough horse, not, I started thinking about that. And then the original log line when I was developing this was, what would happen if you dropped Brienne of Tarth into the land of the Muppets?
Oh my God, I love that. Oh my God. Oh wow, so, you've touched on two of my favorite things there, so that's amazing.
yeah, because I thought it would be great if you took someone who's literally from an action show, from just a completely different world. And I love Game of Thrones. I love all sorts of different things. And then I'm a child of the 90s, and I grew up on so many of those Henson films like Labyrinth and Neverending Story, and they had such a combination of some really dark themes. And like some really cute, fun characters, but also some really terrifying imagery. And that was something that I grew up with. And so, and so I really wanted to, I really wanted to combine all these things that I loved. The other inspirations for Centaurworld were things like video games too, like the Zelda games, and specifically Ocarina of Time, and that relationship that Link has with Epona is that you develop in that game. There were a lot of different things that I wanted to incorporate, but that was kind of the springboard. The starting point was there, and then I started relating it to my own personal experiences about, like I discussed earlier, being going from being a shyer person to going into show choir, and having that kind of fundamentally change you as a person. So I was thinking, what would happen if, Brienne of Tarth joined Glee, or had to go on a road trip with the Muppets. So, and then the first thing I did when I was developing the show was write the theme song. So I wrote the theme song, and then I storyboarded it, because again, like my background is more in storyboarding. And for my process, because I'm also a very visual person, I thought that the best way to explain the show that is so difficult to describe would be to make something. I'm sort of more of a person who enjoys making things. It's easier for me to communicate that way. So I wrote the theme song, recorded the demo. I remember grabbing friends in the hallway being like, hey, my friend Matt Lazell, who's got a show coming out next year called Battle Kitty. Like I remember grabbing him and being like, Matt, there's this giraffe character. Can you say a couple of these lines? So I did that. And can you sing this, it was so informal and fun, but I did that, and I storyboarded the theme song and shared that with people. And that was like the easiest way for them to understand what I was trying to make. And the what ended up being there for the theme song is pretty much, it's virtually unchanged from how it was originally. So
that's the opening title that you're talking about?
Yes, the opening title.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
a horse running on the globe and Chet smacking her in the face.
The song leading up before that, when she first gets there and she's trying to run away, and then one that whole thing. So that I storyboarded.
and then,
okay.
Yeah, and then I worked with a small team of people. We storyboarded the first episode, and then what I would do was I would just pitch that first episode with the songs in it. Like I had kind of some piano tracks on my phone, and I would just press play when the songs would come up, and I'd be tabbing through the panels and like singing it and doing all the voices. So it was, I did that, must have done that like 100 times. So
yeah, and just sort of singing it and doing all the silly voices and yeah, because that first episode kind of starting in, the regular world as a different, starting it off as in another series, and then having Horse separated and waking up in Centaurworld and having that, like, that was sort of such a clear way to describe what kind of show we were making, versus me getting up in front of a room of people and saying, well, it's an action adventure comedy musical that, like it was just such a word salad. So this was more clear. And yeah, like it I just started, when we actually got into production, I would actually pitch this to a lot of the people we interviewed, like writers, storyboard artists, and directors. Like I ended up pitching it to a lot of people too, which is unusual in the interviewing process, but we were making such a specific thing. And I wanted everyone who came on board to be like, to know what they were getting into. Yeah. And it ended up being something that was actually great in the hiring process, because if you were into musicals or it appealed to your sensibilities, then you'd be excited and you'd have a lot to say about it. And then if you were like, wow, I'm really not into musicals and I don't get this, then it was then it'd be very easy to be like, thank you. So yeah, like once people started, they already had essentially seen the first episode, and they had a lot of ideas coming into it. And for me, in my process, I like hitting things hard at the beginning and building a foundation, and then kind of seeing what other people bring to the table. Like a lot of our artists brought in their anime influences. There's a lot of like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure references, Pokemon, like a lot of people who like, and they brought that and infused it. And it's like, like just adding layers to something that already has a specific tone of voice to it. And that's always like the most fun part, is once you bring other players in and they come in and they bring themselves to it.
That's great. That's a really cool story. I love the Derpleton on the chopstick. That is amazing.
Impressive.
That was a great question. Sorry, it was like a long tangent, but
I mean, we can ask you more on production, certainly.
Yeah, it's funny that I knew that my wife would have a great question for you, because I feel like, oh yeah, she's an artist, she's an illustrator, she's a musician. Oh yes, they're going to have a lot in common. So okay, yeah. I'm glad she submitted that. Anyway. All right, Kirt, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Well, so I'm in my early 20s. I'm a Zoomer. Mr. Sal, he's in Generation X. His wife's a millennial, right? His sons are in Gen Alpha. So there's a lot of people in different, generations. I have friends who've seen the series that are also, my age, and they've all, they've enjoyed it. So is it your intention to make the show have broad appeal, right? And if so, how did you try to go about accomplishing that? So that way, people from all ages.
Yeah, that's a great question. That was something I definitely had in mind. I knew that, when you're making something that has, is intended for the co-viewing experience, like I know, like Sam, you mentioned that your kids were watching it, and then you kind of came into it like at a later point in the series.
Yeah, I'll bring that up in a minute. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like I definitely like some of the favorite feedback I've gotten from people who've seen the series are like I've heard from different people who've watched it with their kids and their parents, like just knowing that there are people from different generations able to enjoy it together. And I tried not to overthink it. I just knew that I wanted to tell a story that was friendly for kids, but that where we didn't shy away from heavier themes, because I think those are important. Not just because, like as a millennial myself, and as someone who grew up with some, kind of disturbing content in the 90s, like, and I turned out more or less okay. But I knew that that kids like to be challenged, that they don't like being talked down to, and B, that there are some topics that I do wish had been brought up earlier in my life, especially as they pertain to mental health. And that I think, like, I feel like there are a lot of things that can just be presented and are good conversation starters, and that, you know, like it's good to challenge kids and that they actually like being challenged by content. And so I was conscious of that, but I also, you know, I also just wanted to make something that I enjoyed as a person too. Like, you know, I love musicals, I love comedy, I love, you know, like sci-fi and fantasy. And I knew like I wanted to have a show that had all these elements that I enjoyed. And the glue that we kind of tried to keep to keep it all together was just a story where we as the writers cared about our characters, and where we felt like we were making sure that the characters cared about each other. So having something that just ultimately had you know, an emotional through line to it that we felt was compelling. We felt like that could be enough of a glue to bind all these disparate elements together, and hopefully appeal to different, you know, different kinds of people of different ages.
Yeah, I think you've really succeeded there. And one of our podcast coverage of Centaurworld has been primarily focused on emotional intelligence and mental health, and the aspects that you've brought into the series. So it's what I love so much about the series. In fact, so I'd mentioned before that I had a pretty unconventional experience watching the series. So you had mentioned that the songs you're most proud of were, first of all, Becky Apples is, I think, the funniest song in the series. So great job. When they say, and her name is Becky Apples, because of course it is, I lose it every time. The fact that you said you were very proud of the early songs in episode 1, the Hootenanny Chorale, which brings all of those songs together. I'm in tears every time I watch that song. So, but what brought me into the series was Breathe in a Bag, actually. So I was just
really?
So I was just doing schoolwork in my dining room, and my kids were watching Centaurworld, and I wasn't really paying attention. And then I heard something about reaction formation, and I kind of looked up. And then I listened to the entire Breathe in a Bag song, and my jaw kind of hit the floor, and I said, is there more to the series than I gave it credit for initially? I maybe should check this out. And then I think the next day they were watching Bunch of Scrunch. And when I saw Horse jump into everyone's backstory, and you literally gave your main character the superpower of empathy, I said, okay, I need to watch the rest of the series. And then I actually, after that, happened upon them watching the finale. So I actually saw the finale before I saw almost really anything from season 1.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but I kind of love that, because when I heard Wamawink singing Fragile Things in episode 2, I was in tears, because I just kept picturing her at the top of the cliff and the battle round song, sending her bubbles down to save the rest of the herd from the Minotaurs.
Yeah.
So it was a really emotional experience just in episode 2. So I imagine that it must have been pretty emotional writing the early episodes if you had the end in mind. So I guess my question is, how much of the end did you have in mind at the beginning? And was it very emotional to write those early episodes knowing where you were going from there?
Yeah, I in the early I had the end in mind. Pretty early on, I had actually also written the Nowhere King's backstory and all of that lore too. Like, I remember just staying up a couple of nights and like writing this insane document that was all over the place, but kind of writing the backstory of that. And when we did end up going there, and like, it was interesting as we were looking at the script and kind of actually figuring out what order to present those memories as she takes that tour into the Nowhere King's backstory with the elk. And it was really complicated, but knowing where we were going, it was emotional, kind of knowing you know, like what each of these characters kind of represented, who they were, and trying to figure out like where, you know, like knowing where they were going to go. Like, even at the beginning, we knew Derpleton was going to adopt a Minotaur.
Oh,
and,
that's so cool.
Yeah, like we had all these arcs for the characters planned out from the beginning about, you know, like we actually did both seasons back to back. So it was, for us, you know, production wise, it was like, you know, episode 1 through 18. And we had that all just sort of yeah, so we but in the process, it would get more emotional. I think by the final storyboard pitch, yeah, it was I remember actually like crying after, because we pitched to the whole crew, and we pitched the finale with, you know, with and yeah, just like with the when the final song ended and all of that, like I remember like having to say some words to the crew, and I remember crying.
Yeah.
Just because it was such a journey getting there. But from at the beginning, yeah, kind of first, I think writing like Writer's Lullaby and knowing that this was going to be, you know, this is something really, trying to write something really simple, that simple and sweet and emotionally pure, I guess, at the beginning, and knowing what was going to happen to these characters later. Yeah, it was always a pretty emotional experience. But I guess I think our affection for the characters and getting that invested so early on really helped us keep things as genuine or as sincere as possible. I think sincerity was one of the things that we tried to preserve throughout the show, even though the comedy could be all, you know, like it could get pretty broad and pretty wacky and strange and surreal. We always wanted these characters to be sincere in how they were with each other.
Well, I think you've definitely accomplished that. That definitely shines through. You brought up the Nowhere King, so we have a few questions about the Nowhere King that we'd like to ask, if that's okay. Yeah. So Kirt and I are in some disagreement about this. So I noticed that the voice of the general, Brian Darcy James, is different from the voice of the Alktar, the Alk, and the Nowhere King, who are all voiced by Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Yes.
I also noticed that when the Alktar splits the rutabaga, the rutabaga ends up as just a rutabaga, not an animated, I mean, animated in the sense that it's drawn, but not mobile, and there's no locomotion or verbalization. So the Alktar says that he intended to draw out the beast part of himself. Now, clearly the Alk was more than he'd imagined. But did the Alktar's consciousness go into both the Alk and the general, or was his consciousness trapped entirely in the Alk and the general was a different part of him altogether? Kind of like someone with multiple personality disorder might have different consciousnesses that don't necessarily interact with each other. And if they're the same consciousness, well, actually, why don't I let you answer that question first, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, I love this question.
I hope you agree with me here. Let's see.
You don't know which one of us is which.
I love this question. So there's some foreshadowing in episode 1, actually.
Oh, really?
So basically, it's the tiny versions. So when that first moment when Womwink shoots a tiny version, the first thing it says, it comes into consciousness and asks, where, like, how did I get here? Why was I made? And runs off screaming. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Prestige by Christopher Nolan.
Oh yes.
Or if you have played the video game Soma.
I've
not done that. The Prestige. I love The Prestige, so I know what you're talking about.
Soma is really, it's really disturbing. It's highly disturbing. But a big part of it is it's the question of so we'll talk about The Prestige since you guys have seen that. So the twist at the end is we find out what he's been doing is he's actually been making replicas of himself, and you know. But I think what gets explored further in Soma is if your consciousness is replicated, and like if you're in the body of a robot or something else, like, but you know, like if you've split your consciousness, what happens? And so the answer is, these things retain the memories of, you know, like in the tiny version's case, they retain the memories of their you know, of regular Womawink, but now they've just come into being. And so in the case of the Alktar, like if you were to take the rutabaga, what he didn't do was he saw the baby in the rutabaga. And if he had scanned the rutabaga, he would know that the consciousness of the other is still in there, and it probably would have been pretty upset. So it's the same being. So it's like in The Prestige. So basically, yeah, he's both instances of himself are in. One instance of himself is in the Altar, and one instance of himself is in the General. But like in Soma, they call it losing the coin toss. Like there's a coin toss.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
even if you like it's still, so basically the General is him. It's still him. It's the same person, but himself living from a place of privilege. And then the horror is that he also put himself into this other being who he didn't expect to have that. You think of yourself, you think of it as other, but it's actually him
still you,
too.
yeah.
And it's suffering, and then he ultimately causes more suffering to himself. Or like in The Prestige, he's literally drowning himself, right? Like he's literally killing himself over and over again. And that's his burden there. But like, yeah, that was something that I always found fascinating. That idea was something fascinating. And in Centaurworld, we explore so much about duality, and in the case of that character, he's so torn and so tortured, but he's not thinking things through. And he's brilliant, but he's also he's also short-sighted by his own distress. And like he's there's a lot of parallels between the Altar / Nowhere King / General and Horse, but he chose a different path in terms of how to he chose a path of like obsessive love and kind of a more self-centered love, and Horse kind of diverged and went down a different path than he did. But so it's all him. We put Brian Darcy James and Brian Stokes Mitchell are both amazing. They're both like legendary Broadway singers. The Broadway Bryans. And I think we didn't want to make it. I think we felt like if the General was also played by Brian Stokes Mitchell, it would be perhaps too obvious that that it was the same character. And we thought of it being like he's physically changed himself so much that it was okay for him to have a different voice.
I like that. That's pretty great.
And then I don't know if you noticed in the first episode of season 2, the first time we meet the General, he actually he's in a sling. Like he's been injured from battle, but that's actually the injury from when the Ryder had stabbed the Nowhere King at the end of season 1. And so
I never thought about that.
So because he can't, so he's injured because of that.
So
we put subtle, like if you go back and look, there's like subtle things where there might be indications, but that was one.
Wow, that's fantastic.
That's good.
Now I will tell you, I love that explanation. But Kirt does win. So
I told you they're the same person. And that's the beauty of it. I love it. Yeah, same person.
I was thrown off by the different voices, but I love that explanation that he's changed physically so much that it makes sense for him to have a different voice. So, okay, great. Yeah. So, you brought up something, Kirt, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, but you brought up something that I thought was interesting. You said that there's a lot of similarities between the Altar and Horse. So when I watch the series, I kind of always think of Horse and Ryder as almost being metaphorically, not literally, but like two parts of one whole. Was that at all a thought as you were writing those characters?
I always thought of them as like sort of soulmates, like there's I think at the end there's a line like the soldiers can rest, the sisters can start their lives again. So they both were orphaned when they were kids, like little, and they grew up together as like everyone around them is dying, but they're sticking together. And so I always imagine there being a lot of love there. They're truly family to one another. And so it's like a lifelong bond and just a very pure love. I would say so. Like they are sort of two halves.
Gotcha. Great.
And yeah.
Yeah.
I guess a bit more than Nowhere King then. So end of the series, right? Some people have a tough time swallowing that the mysterious woman kills the elk tower instead of sparing him at the end. Me, Mr. Sal, think of it more of a mercy than a punishment. Can you talk about your decision, or why the choice was made not to spare the elk tower?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple things. To your point about mercy, yeah, he's dying already, you know. I actually storyboarded that scene too, and I made a point to have him, put the kind of that moment from The Fly where he puts the weapon to his head. He's dying, he is dying. He's also caused a lot of pain already. But I mean, thematically, I think because these characters are for Horse and Rider, I wanted them to end that cycle of violence, and then for the woman and the Nowhere King, that was in a lot of ways like a representative of a toxic relationship, and also with mental health being a theme in so much of the show. I think one thing is like accountability too, the idea that you can sympathize with someone who has a condition or who is struggling with their health internally, but also holding them accountable for or responsible for their actions that they do, or the things that they do, right. That it cannot be an excuse. So yes, we got to know the Nowhere King a little bit better. We see why he did the things he did, but still, like, genocide happened, lying, gaslighting. I wrote one of the things that we wrote were sort of like, I think back in episode 10 of, in episode 10 of season 1, we see the woman come in to the rifts, and she says her wedding vows, and we don't introduce the idea that those were her wedding vows then, but if you I wrote that wedding song in episode 8 in the finale. And if you listen to what they're saying, he's talking way more than she is, and the stuff that he's saying, like, I swear I will never stop thinking about you. You've come to set me free. It's some stuff that's echoed, and if you should hurt me, I'll always forgive you. You are a part of me. It's all very it's centered around him. So it was never a healthy relationship.
Yeah, clearly.
And so I know that in it seems pretty brutal, but to me it's like symbolic of ending a toxic relationship. And it's I know that there is it's a mercy killing. Some might interpret it as murder, but it's it's the woman has stood by, and she's literally she's been in Centaurworld for a long time, and the timeline in the show is kind of funny. I mean, everyone's ages are all over the place, but we always intended, we knew we didn't have to make it clear, but I always thought that the woman and the general this war would have been happening for like 100 years at least. This has been going on for a long time. It's all that Ryder and Horse had ever known, because generations had been fighting, and so this has been going on for a long time, and the woman hasn't really aged that much. She and the general kind of are frozen by their trauma, or they're frozen in time by this thing that happened to them. And so she has not acted to do anything she's sort of been there hurting in Centaurworld, but has stood by. And so I felt like she had to do something to end the cycle, because it would just, if he lived, it would continue. Inevitably, it would continue because of these choices that he has made. So he did need to die. He did need to, we needed this cycle to stop, and he did need to, take accountability for all of the pain and death and suffering that he caused, because, thousands of lives were lost because of his actions.
Yeah, I do love the fact that we'll talk about it later, non-binary morality, or how you made the Nowhere King kind of relatable.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do love the fact that, Nowhere King's the big bad person, and then at the end I'm feeling really bad that the poor Elktar has to be put down. So that was really good.
Just real quick about the non-binary morality piece. That is something. I'm not sure if you. I'm certain you must have had that in mind, at least to some extent, when you were writing the Nowhere King. But that's something that's just so important to me in what I show my kids. I grew up on shows where it was clearly there was good, there was evil, there was nothing in between. You were either good or evil, and I've had to really reconcile that in adulthood. That is absolutely not the case. So it's so important to me to have something that my kids love as much as they love Centaurworld, put non-binary morality on display like this. So really, thank you for doing that.
Oh no, thank you for saying that, and for because I agree, and I feel the same way, that having these such black and white characters doesn't, it's also like less interesting. It feels more like it feels more like watching, like Bible stories, kind of, if it's like just the hero versus Satan or whatever, when I think we were very conscious of that with the Nowhere King, where Horse has one idea of who this enemy is, and having that completely flipped on its head, and that even causing some, them to, her and Ryder, to fight after she comes out of him. But when he says, you and I are, alike, or I know what that's, when he relates to her and when she finds herself relating to him too, I think it's important to remember that no one is black and white, that everything is in shades of gray, and that the choices that we make, like we're all so close to making choices that can lead us down the wrong path too.
Right.
And it's usually people usually start off, thinking they're doing the right thing, and it's really important to see all those shades of gray. I think for kids, for adults, it's always important to have those reminders.
Absolutely.
I guess last thing on the Nowhere King, and we can move on to something else, is at the end of What You Need, when they start singing the Nowhere King lullaby, the leaves and the plants, Horse says she recognizes this song. Now, does she actually recognize it, or is it just because she's like kind of like a war horse, and just the idea of like death and destruction, or like that's what she recognizes?
Yeah, I actually always thought that it was like an actual lullaby that would have crept into both worlds. It was like a lullaby that she, because I wrote that song too, and I in the original demo I even had an off tune music box kind of sound to it, but because the timelines are so warped, and because Horse has been at war for so long, like I thought there might be hints of him in her world too. It's sort of like if you look at what I love about like nursery rhymes, and why I kind of wrote it that way, was like Ring Around the Rosie, Rockabye Baby. If you listen if you actually listen to the lyrics of a lot of these things, they're actually weirdly sinister, but they might be something that you hear sung and you never really think about it. So even if it was something that would have sounded familiar to Horse, even if she had never really heard the words or paid attention to it, it was just something. It's one of those lullabies that you might have heard before.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, no, certainly. I guess let's move on to one of our favorite episodes. Me, Mr. Sal, has to be the whale tar shaman episode. And we have some questions about that. So at first viewing, we thought the whale tar represented, and the idea of course jumping in and the whole environment of that, was suicide. But we thought about it a bit more, and it's reversible because she's able to leave the whale tar. So maybe something with substance abuse. What was your intention for what the whale tar shaman's supposed to represent?
Yeah, she could really represent both of those things. Okay. We escapism in some substance abuse is also something that we had in mind, but it was more, like the idea of suicide and all of that was top of mind, I think,
Mm-hmm.
for us, just something avenues people use to unhealthily to numb pain. And something, but obviously, we knew that we were making a children's show.
Right.
So we were, we also were thinking of, I think we were watching some like commercials from like those Kathy Gifford,
Yep.
like cruise ship commercials that she did,
Carnival.
and like the Carnival cruise ship. Yeah, like it's like her singing on a cruise ship. And we're talking about how kind of creepy cruise ships are in some ways.
Oh,
like,
wow.
But just that sort of weird escapism thing. So we were thinking. So that's why, like, when they get in there, Horse is sort of sedately talking about like a shuffleboard tournament, and they're doing there's a conga line, and Jeb Reeves in his little like sailor suit and all of that. But just so there's some we had sort of like a cruise line / nursing home vibe in there, but yeah, like we wanted to leave it open to interpretation, but thoughts of suicide were definitely, like that was something that we thought that it would at least be, it was a delicate, of course, it's a very delicate topic for a lot of people, but I don't know, I feel like, sometimes kids feel that way, and like plenty of people that I know have had suicidal ideation as children, and it's very difficult for them to talk about it. And I think that, like I felt like it was important to be able to show that, and also to be like, this is a valid feeling that people sometimes feel, and it's important to be able to share it. And so, it was something we wanted to explore, and we also wanted to make sure that at the end of the episode, when the herd gets Horse back onto land, that she wasn't shamed for it, or no one judged her for it, and that she was just sort of embraced and told that she can lean on them for it, instead of we just wanted to make sure that we could show this is a thing that people sometimes feel, but also that your family is not going to should not judge you for those feelings, even if they're scary. And I've talked to some people who've said that it was like a good conversation starter too for kids in their family to be able to talk about those kinds of feelings.
I totally agree. That's kind of what it did in my family as well. I really appreciate that. Again, it's interesting. I know so many people, adults, maybe even current students, who I would love to say, just watch this episode. You need to watch this episode. I feel like it would help you so much. But instead, I just say watch the whole series. So anyway,
thank you.
So this really is one of our favorite episodes. There's a song in the episode, the "Who Is She" reprise, and you show us Ryder a lot in that song, and so on its face, Horse seems to be singing about Ryder, but my kids and I listened to the soundtrack so much before I even ever saw this episode. So I knew this song. I knew this song already before I had even seen the episode. So when I heard the song before, I always had in my head that Horse was singing about herself. So was there some intentional double meaning there, or is that just because I didn't have the full context?
No, it's definitely intended to have a double meaning, especially since in the last episode too, in the Cats episode, the Qatar episode, there's some double meaning in that one too. Like she says, because she's worth it too. She's talking about Ryder. She's also talking about herself.
I love that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of those two songs. There's definitely instances where it's supposed to be double meaning. She's referring to herself. She's also referring to Ryder.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I also like being right, so that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's so nice that you guys listen to the lyrics so closely too.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like, seriously, when I tell you that we have consumed this soundtrack more than we consumed breakfast over the last half a year or so.
Oh
So yeah, and in my house, I can't speak for Kirt here, but in my house we have. So, my kids know all the lyrics as well. So speaking of my kids, my older son Griffin is completely obsessed with Comfortable Doug. So he has a question for you as well that we've recorded.
Awesome.
Kirt, can you play this question?
Griffin, is there anything that you would like to say or ask the creator of Centaurworld, who is also the voice of Glendale?
Yes. What was your inspiration for Comfortable Doug?
Griffin is a big Comfortable Doug fan.
That's awesome.
Oh, you have no idea how obsessed he is.
I mean, the crew was also obsessed with Comfortable Doug. I think he was the crew favorite too. That's why there's so much more of him in season 2. But so first of all, like, I'll try to get through this quickly. His name, Comfortable Doug, which is obviously like a very specific name, even by Centaurworld standards. That came from, I was talking with one of my buddies, and I was at like the lunch table, and somebody else was in a conversation with him, and I hopped back into the conversation like at the wrong time, so I missed what he was saying. But he was basically talking about how he preferred safer looking cartoons. He found like Ren and Stimpy to be too grotesque, and so he was saying that he preferred the show Doug because it was comfortable. He liked the comfortable look of Doug, but all I heard was Comfortable Doug. And I was like, I want to know who this is. Who is Comfortable Doug? That's a great name. And we were like, we have to name a character in the show Comfortable Doug. And wow. I had been drawing on these Post-it notes. I'd been drawing the Moltar characters. And I was like, well, that's a perfect name for this, kind of disturbing fleshy creature that I just drew. And then we talked about the possibility of him being German, and Dominic, my coach, his wife is German, and so like a lot of his in-laws are German, and we talked about the possibility of him being German and maybe him having kind of a dry, like Werner Herzog-y way of talking, and so that kind of found its way into the writing. And then we thought of Flula Borg because he's awesome. And
yes, he is.
And then he agreed to do it, and he brought so much to the character in his reads and his improv. And like the character became, because we told him this character is going to be a little bit awkward, and he's going to say things that are strange, and he completely added to it. And he just brought so much quirkiness and character and sass to the unexpected sass to the character. And I feel like the unusual way, I guess the way that he talks, it became almost more like Speak and Spell like as we went on.
Oh, that is brilliant. Yes.
Because we told him from the beginning, we're like, at times he might put the emphasis in the wrong place of the word or a sentence, but he doesn't care because, he is who he is. And Dominic wrote Comfortable Doug, the song, which is, I think, might be my favorite song from the whole series. It's just such an earworm.
It is.
Yeah, but that character was so much fun. I think everyone, like all of the artists, just loved just throwing him in wherever they could.
Was he not originally intended to fill the roles he did, and it kind of just became that?
I think as we were continuing to write, I think because of what Flula gave us to, and we talked about, I think from the beginning we did intend for him to we talked about like Werner Herzog as a bit of an inspiration as well. And like in the Glendale episode, in the 3rd episode of season 2, there's that bit where she's stuck on the other side of the ice where they just created that barrier, and that scene was always like, from very early on we had talked about there's that Werner Herzog documentary. I just forgot the name of it, but there's a scene from it you can find on YouTube where I think it's basically a penguin goes inland away from the rest of the Antarctic penguins, and it's just, and like he's just sort of monologuing about like, has this penguin descended into madness, you know, like where he just sort of talks, and it's a very wide shot of this penguin just running to certain death inland away from the ocean where it gets its food and its community. And so we always talked about this scene, and so that's why it's kind of storyboarded the way it is. It's very wide, and Glendale is just kind of doing her thing. And
wow.
Yeah, and our writer Amalia Lavari wrote this, just was amazing at writing this very particular flowery dialogue for Doug. And and so that is, so part of it was just Flula being Flula, and he's just so great at improvising, and he's such a character, and like just a really nice delightful person to work with. And then I think just everyone just gravitated towards this character. It was fun. He was fun to write songs for. He was fun to just kind of have in there as a part of the world. And also I think just because he was such an agent of chaos too, being, you know, like, or he has his own agenda. He's chaotic neutral, you know, you're not.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yes. My comings and goings cannot be understood by the mortal mind. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, I guess on a different note then, there's the concept of being wibbly wobbly, right? Horse, Stabby, Ryder, they all become wibbly wobbly. How does that work, right? How does someone become wibbly wobbly? Like, me and Mr. Sava theories, you know, is it embracing Centaurworld, found family in Centaurworld, the herd? And noteworthy is that the woman, despite being in Centaurworld for so long, we never see her really become wibbly wobbly.
Yeah. So she is not fully changed by the world. So there's like a hint that she could have become wibbly wobbly in the backstory. Like her hair is purple. You know, her hair is like that very bright color. And when we see in the flashbacks, when like there's this kind of cute moment when like the Eltar is seeing her come through the rift and he's smitten by her. Like she's hanging out in Centaurworld, and that's maybe how her hair became this lilac color to begin with. But
yes.
But yeah, like she has stopped her. I guess she won't transition. She doesn't transition into a wibbly wobbly character because she is in this, still very much in her trauma, in this toxic situation. She's never kind of moved past that, and she's kind of hermiting in Centaurworld. She's like, you know, roommates with Bertar, and
love that.
Kind of just like lurking around. And what she's doing in there too is she's doing like mural paintings of the war that she's still very like, she has guilt and grief, and she's stuck in that. So she doesn't change because she's just there, but isn't embracing the world, or she's just sort of trapped in that cycle. And so that's why she doesn't continue to change, and that's why she's still angular. But for Horse, and later for Stabby and for Ryder, it's about internally, you know, embracing Centaurworld and embracing the new things of that world. Like for me, it was like going into show choir initially. Like I could have just been there and not changed, because I could have just sort of, you know, half-assed it or whatever. But like by the end of like the first semester in show choir, I was doing jazz hands and wearing sparkly dresses, and you know, I was doing the really broad faces and singing and all of that. So it's sort of embracing the new things in there. And for Horse, that's I think what we were calling it, like in the writer's room, was like unlocking her emotional tool belt, I guess, or adding things to her tool belt.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that kind of change, that's what changed it for her. And then for Stabby, it was kind of, you know, like actually like becoming a part of the herd and acknowledging Durpleton's love for him, and like you sort of see little snippets of him, like he actually goes to his room, he regrets it when he praises the Nowhere King, but embracing that very strange relationship between the two of them. But,
the bad boy baby boy timeout zone. I love that. Oh wow. You've already talked a lot about one of the themes of Centaurworld being trauma and trauma responses. Someone I'm close to has suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, for years, ever since having a severe car accident. Now, when they saw the episode, What You Need, they were in awe of Wamowing's behavior at the edge of the forest. They said, oh my God, that's exactly what it's like. Your brain gets all and you physically can't bring yourself to move forward. So was it your intention to help people better understand those around them and how the trauma they have impacts them? Because that's what it did for me.
Yeah, I mean, trauma was one of the central themes. One of our writers, Minty Lewis, had recommended I read The Body Keep the Score as we were starting writing too.
Yes, yep.
And yeah, like that was so eye-opening, just reading about like how physical trauma is too. And it really kind of informed how we, like how we treated the characters and what their experience of it was. Yeah. And having Wamowing feel frozen and feel so discombobulated as we arrived at the place of her trauma was important.
Yeah. That's
also like in the finale too, with the elk revisiting some of those some of his backstory and it being kind of out of place too was part of why it was why it was out of order. And then we also we had him keep going to food memories because it was kind of like a safe place for him. Throughout all of what he was going through. But we definitely wanted trauma to kind of be front and center in the story.
Yeah, great job with that. I mean, really, just seeing Wamowing in that situation and having someone explain that to me, I thought, oh wow, I've been misunderstanding this the whole time. So I really do appreciate that. So Megan, I personally believe that the series is perfect as it is, and I'd be completely satisfied with having only this from Centaurworld in perpetuity. But have you told the story that you intended to tell, or is there stuff left unexplored that you either wanted to or want to explore?
So I told the story that I wanted to tell, but it was really just such a great experience making it. And the team that we got together, from the actors to our team of artists and our production crew, like everyone was like, it really was such a positive experience. And so many people brought more than I could have ever imagined to the table that, I would love to tell more. I have joked about just you could do a whole, a mini series just about Zulius's backstory, since we ultimately didn't show it because there's too much there. But yeah, like I mean, I told the story I wanted to tell, but also, like there would be an interesting. It would be interesting to see like what is it like for the herd now, like going through and kind of on this journey of healing this world that is now like these two worlds that are connected and are now recovering from, from this devastating thing that has happened to them. Like that is a story that I think would be amazing to explore too. So to answer your question, yes, I told the story that I wanted to tell, but I would totally love to tell more.
Okay, well, you've earned my trust, so I trust that you'll do a great job with it. So,
you've built a wonderful universe that you can probably explore more in. We have another question for you, which I don't know if you even want to answer it, but has Netflix shown any interest in more Centaurworld?
I don't think we're gonna be making more Centaurworld. Yeah, I had a great experience working with Netflix. I think that the like the beauty of Netflix is that there is such, there is no existing brand. You can kind of tell all of these really specific kinds of stories, and these, occupy these different niches. So creatively, it was amazing. And I think that, like, I went in knowing that we were getting this amazing opportunity to make this thing that was really special to me and that was really specific that I wouldn't get to make anywhere else. And I also knew that meant that in all likelihood, this was going to be, I would only get one shot to make this. And so I went in knowing that, and being at peace with that. So I haven't gotten any indication that we could make more, but I'm at peace with that. Like I knew that going in.
Well, I'm sad for you, but like I said, I love this series, right? Exactly the way it is. So yeah, so this is fantastic. But I do have one. It's not a complaint. It's just something I'd love to see. My kids and I would
totally open to critique.
It's not about Centaurworld. My kids and I would really like to have some officially licensed Centaurworld merchandise, but we can't find any. Is there any?
Yeah,
is there any? Is
okay,
that yeah? Go ahead.
There is no official licensed Centaurworld merch. That part does make me sad. There isn't. I think in general, there isn't all that much Netflix merch
You're
for
right.
like a lot of, I don't think there is that much in general. They have so much content.
Yes.
And I don't think they generally have a lot of merch, and we don't have official merch. But what I will say is there have been a lot of artists who have made amazing things, from plushes to, keychains and shirts, and yeah, I've been just totally blown away by the fan art and the costumes and all of the creative things that the fans have made. So I'm super bummed that we don't have merch, but I'm also just blown away by how fans have kind of, made things for themselves. And if support different artists who are making, I totally, go buy the fan stuff that people are making.
All right. That sounds great.
We don't have official merch. So
Hey, now that we have your blessing,
by all means.
I bought a Wamawink plush. So it's people are making amazing things, and I don't think
that's great.
There's some people who've made these amazing handcrafted things that they're selling at Etsy and all of that, and it makes me happy to see that, even though I'm sad that we don't have official merch.
Okay, well, and like I said, now that I have your blessing, I'll tell you, we have lots of T-shirts already anyway.
Yeah, so. I was gonna say it. Yeah, I was gonna say it.
No. It's, do it, because we don't have Netflix hasn't made official merch, so I'm just happy that people are wearing shirts or whatever.
Oh, every Friday, my wife wears her surprise face Wamawink t-shirt to school. She's a teacher as well. I wear my horse and rider nose to nose shirt to school. Griffin, my oldest son, wears his comfortable dog t-shirt to school, and Hugo wears his Daddletons and Sunneltons only t-shirt to school. So yeah, you're getting a lot of advertisement that way. A lot of my students have started watching the show. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they love it, by the way. I haven't talked to any one of my students, and I teach high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and I haven't talked to any of them who don't love the show. So
that's really awesome to hear.
It's great. So if you would be game for it, we would love to ask you about some of your favorite things within Centaurworld, and maybe even outside of Centaurworld, if you're game for it. Okay, so great. So we'll go first because we knew we were going to do this, so we'll give you some time to think. So we'll give you our favorites, and then when it comes back around, you can give us your favorites. So let's start in Centaurworld, and let's see if we can all talk about our favorite character in Centaurworld. For me, it's Horse. Horse has the most growth. Horse is, I mean, it's not beyond the fact that she's our central character. I connect with Horse so much, especially when she during that "Who Is She" reprise. It just is soul crushing to me. It's like that throughout the entire series. So Horse is my favorite. Kirt, who's your favorite?
So I thought about this. At first, I was going to say Glendale or someone like that, which is kind of chalk, I guess, because Megan, you're here. But this sounds like a bit of a kiss-up answer. But I thought about it. You know what? I'll think of it in terms of what character did I like relative to the screen time they got, right? So how much I like them and how much screen time they got. And because of that, I would probably say Stabby. Because every time I see Stabby, I think Stabby's really great. And I love the story Stabby has with Durpleton and all that stuff. So Stabby, I think, is probably my favorite character.
Awesome.
Okay, well, that brings us around to you, Megan.
Yeah. Those are both great answers, by the way. I think my favorite is probably Womawink, actually. Yeah.
Great character. Great character.
Everyone loves the like the mom friend.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like she would be like amazing to have as a friend in real life. Like I have some friends like that, and they're really just, the best. Like the friend who always has, pastries ready for you, and
yes.
and yes. Just wants to we, like, me and some of my friends use the term momming, like we use mom as a verb sometimes, but just like everyone needs to be mommed a little bit sometimes.
Absolutely. So you would start the Womawink fan club for the Bird Tars.
Yes.
And this was a Stabby fan club. Sadly, he came in too late.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Stabby, by the way, that whole thing was kind of inspired roughly by me. My favorite thing when playing D&D was always to like try to adopt a goblin or something, like, and like torture the DM by just like making them have to play the role of like this dying orc or something, like I'd always try to do that. So, and like a lot of my friends have, done similar things, but that was kind of where that came from.
Good.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. All right. How about, and these are probably going to get progressively harder for you because you're so attached to them, but how about your favorite episode? Now, obviously maybe not so obviously, but my favorite episode is certainly The Last Lullaby, but I have a feeling Kirt isn't going to let me say The Last Lullaby because he's going to say, oh, that's like 3 episodes or whatever.
Like
right,
4.
Kirt?
Yeah, like 4 in 1.
Okay.
I wrote the same thing. It's like kind of the last one, but it's so it's like a lot of episodes in one.
Yeah. So beyond The Last Lullaby, my favorite episode is Bunch of Scrunch, because I think it's so important that the superpower of the main character is empathy. It is a superpower. My wife, by the way, has that superpower. I don't know how she does it. She knows exactly what people are feeling emotionally just by looking at them. I don't know how she does that, but I always call that her superpower. So when I saw Horse get this superpower, I thought, wow, that is really powerful stuff. So Bunch of Scrunch, outside of The Last Lullaby, is my favorite. Kirt?
Like I said, The Last Lullaby is probably the best episode in my eyes, but yeah, it's kind of unfair because it gets so much more screen time than the other episodes. So I would probably say Ride the Whale Tar Shaman. I mean, we already talked about it. I really enjoyed the episode. I'll say another bit I was going to say on it, but I really like Sunfish Merguy's aspect of it too. I think it's kind of underrated compared to the Whale Tar Shaman, but yeah.
That's a good choice too. I like that we also had the like the 5 minutes of Merdude, of Wamawink's zine, featuring the sexy mermen in there.
Yes.
In the same episode where we covered some heavy stuff.
I think it was really important to put that there. That was great.
There's some good comedy there, like Sean and Barnacus, wherever that goes. Like there's still some good comedy in the episode.
Yeah. Hey Megan, so on the spot,
favorite episode.
Oh gosh, I mean, I love all of so many people talents. Like I have so many. It's so hard to pick.
Yeah, it's like asking me who my favorite child is.
I was gonna relate to that. Yeah. Or almost like, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, gosh, it probably changes every day. I think that the one right before the Ride the Whale Tar Shaman, the cat tar one, was just so much fun to work on too.
Yeah.
That one is also like, that one was also one of my favorites.
Bonus points if you can recite the entire title right now. Johnny T times B best competition, a quest for the sash. Great job. Wow. Very good.
That's very impressive.
That's awesome. Okay, how about, these are getting more specific now. How about a favorite scene? For me, I adore the battle round, which is when the herd is all singing their own separate songs and in their own separate places on the battlefield. But I think Kirt is going to tell me that that's not allowed.
What?
Because it's a song, not a scene, right? I mean, I think it's still a scene anyway. But so if Kirt vetoes that one, yeah, you will. I know you will. So then I would go with the end of the Hootenanny when Horse turns around to Ryder and the rest of the herd and says, "Thank you for being my family," and then charges toward the Nowhere King. And Ryder asks what she's doing, and Wamawink says, "Magic." That gets me choked up just even thinking about it.
It's a sad one. My favorite scene, it's kind of hard to pick. I guess my favorite scene has to be in The Last Lullaby when the general and the elk meet each other right by the pond, and then the general decides to try and drown the elk. Because up until that moment, I had not seen the general as a bad guy yet, right? That it wasn't really revealed to me that the general was a bad person. And that was a severe escalation of what was going on. And it really set the stakes a lot higher than what I had realized that they were going to be or what was going on. You know, I'm like, okay, well, understandably, the elk is sad because the general is getting the life the elk wish he had, and understandably wants to reform together and give it a try. But general just goes, nope, not even risking it. I'm going to try and drown you. And that scene was, I mean, it was made pretty well with, you know, pretty graphic, I guess, in terms of a kid's cartoon. It was well made, I'd say. And then even after that, the fact that he then captures the elk and sentences him for 10 years. He's held for 10 years. And that was, I mean, it really, I don't know, it meant a lot to me in terms of how it affected me in the series and that final episode. So I like that scene a lot.
You guys both picked some pretty good ones, heavy ones.
Yeah, well, we love the heavy stuff on Show Hoppers. Our first series was The Leftovers, if you know anything about that series.
Oh gosh. Yeah, okay. Again, it's very hard for me to be partial because I love so many different moments from this. There's so many, you know, like powerful moments that our team did in The Last Lullaby, but also in Bunch of Scrunch too. I really love Derpleton's backstory. I think I know, like in season 1, people were probably wondering what is up with this dude and his farts, and you know,
yes.
I was.
And then when he tried to adopt Stabby in the beginning of season 2, probably like more confusion. But we had written, you know, we had this planned, and I think in execution and seeing how an artist named Sam Lee storyboarded that section, and she did such an amazing job with I guess staging all of it and figuring out the acting, and that was a moment like when I saw it, I remember it was really emotional for me. And also just in that episode in general, like we worked with a bunch of really talented young actors who did were the younger, who played the younger versions of the characters. So like there was a younger actress who played young Glendale, and some really talented singers who played young Ched and young Derpleton. And so recording them was really special. They were all so amazing and did such a tremendous job of like singing and acting And yeah, like, so I think that episode is special for me just because we had these really talented performers kind of come in and really, you know, like it was very emotional.
Yeah, I imagine that's excellent. That Derpleton's backstory is phenomenal. It's really interesting. That's probably the character that most people I know it did a complete 180 on. Maybe we're kind of lukewarm on him in the beginning, and I had the opposite experience because I again saw the finale. Actually, the first thing I saw of Derpleton was his backstory. So, so going back and watching, you know, when I noticed him talk to his fart in episode 2, I was like, oh my god, that's the thing. That's what happened. So yeah, that's incredible though. All right, I think you've already answered our next question, which would be favorite song in the series. So we can let you go first if you want on this one, because you've already kind of answered this.
Favorites. Oh yeah, Comfortable Doug, I think was. But other aside from that one though, I think Fragile Things, and as an experience of writing it, because that was when Dominic came on board. There were 2 of us sharing an office, and the first thing we did was I was like, we're going to start episode 2, so let's co-write the songs for this. And that was like, because it was like a musical trust fall. So he had like, I had a really crappy guitar in the office, and so we just were recording it on our iPhone, just kind of going back and forth. And it wasn't soundproof, so other people in other offices could probably hear us. It was probably really annoying, but yeah, we co-wrote that song where I wrote Wombling's verse first, and then he wrote Chorus's part, and then we record, you know, like kind of shaped it together, and then we wrote the Tornado together. And so, but getting to write that was really like, after we wrote those songs, and that it's difficult to just meet someone and then start co-writing music with them, but then after that we could kind of divide and conquer, and just we built that trust there, and then we were kind of able to write more after that.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. Oh, wow. Kirt, what's your favorite song in the series?
Breathe in a Bag. So good work, Megan. That was my favorite song. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. And mine is a little surprising. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But mine is The Next Thing, which is the last song in the series. And that I have a very personal attachment to that song. My youngest son, Hugo, and I kind of belt into each other's faces. I am stronger when I trust my family. We listen to it all the time. We belt in each other's faces, and it's I think about it. So when I see it, I play out on screen. It's a very emotional moment for me. So yeah.
It was emotional writing that song, because that was the last demo that because I wrote that at the end. We did it in order, so that was like I wrote that knowing it was the last song that we were going to do, and then every time we recorded it with the actors too, it was sad because it was like it was so final, and we had, you know, so many of the characters came back to have like a little verse here and there.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was like I felt sad writing it.
It was really depressing.
It's really sweet hearing that you sing it with your son.
Oh yeah, we love it. We love it. So that's great. I think if you don't mind, we have some other things besides Centaurworld. I'm really interested in what kind of other pop culture you're into. So
yeah.
So I'll let Kirt handle these. Go ahead, Kirt.
All right. Okay. Well, by all means, it's gonna be hard for me to do favorite. Mr. Sal's super good with favorites. This gets a lot harder for me because I have so much recency bias. I'm just gonna pick, you know. In any case, what about favorite live action series? My favorite one probably has to be, I saw it when I was younger, and it really impressed me the type of dramas I really like. So Breaking Bad has to be for me. There's some nostalgia in that now. So maybe if I rewatch it wouldn't be the case, but I definitely like Breaking Bad. Mr. Sal.
Okay, my favorite live action series is The Leftovers. It's the first show that we covered on this podcast, and actually, I see a lot of parallels with Centaurworld. There's a lot about grief and hope. You know, it looks on its face to be about The Leftovers. Does not Centaurworld, sorry, but The Leftovers looks to be about grief, and it largely is. But there's also a very hopeful message there, and a lot about found family within that series as well. So that's my favorite.
Megan.
Oh gosh, I can only pick one.
You can pick many if you want. I don't care.
Okay. I mean, I'll highlight some that actually, inspired the show a little bit too.
Sure.
But one was the series Fringe.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys caught that one, but that was with J.J. Abrams. I think it's like, I said 4 or 5 seasons. I can't remember, but it's really good. I felt like it was a show that started as like a Monster of the Week kind of like it was like a new version of the X-Files initially.
Right.
But then they got really into this dedicated lore and story. And there were about like, with an alternate universe. And it was so good, like in terms of just the interpersonal relationships and, a fraught relationship between a father and a son and all of that. But like, and where the actors got to play themselves from the alternate universe too. And it was just so well crafted. And that was like a huge inspiration for the show too. Yeah. And then Crazy Ex-Girlfriend was another series that was like a big inspiration too. And that I can't remember. I think that was also 4 seasons, but really smart, really female centric, a lot of female friend. I think it's the story. It really flips a lot of things on tropes on their heads, and it's also a musical series. And Parvez Chino, who plays Zulius, was on it as well. And but it's really smart writing, and it's about mental health too in a big way. So
all right.
That's a really great show. And also I'm from Southern California too, and it's set kind of in the area that I grew up, and that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. Like it's set in West Covina, and that's when so the other character in West Covina, that's like
Glendale.
Glendale.
Not Glendale. Sorry.
West Covina is West Covina, but and Glendale is a city in LA too, in the LA area. Okay. That's where like Burbank and Glendale. That's kind of like where a lot of us work in animation. But so when we had this doppelganger, we naturally named her West Covina as a nod to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And also my parents live in Covina too. So, but yeah, it was, but that show is really, really smart and great.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, those are 2 that I really like.
I'll have to put those on my list.
I guess another favorite animated series other than Centaurworld. You can't say Centaurworld, or I guess anything you've made. Actually, I'm gonna cross off anything you've made. Mine, I guess I would have to say, is Rick and Morty. It's a funny show. Occasionally has a pretty thought-provoking or unique idea and moment because of how they set up their universe. I will say, I feel like in the recent seasons, I think it's fallen off a bit, but especially I think the first 3 seasons, especially, I really like those. So that's why I'd have to say that's my favorite animated series other than Centaurworld. Mr. Sal?
So interestingly, growing up, I was a big He-Man guy, which is really toxic. And so and it's one of the reasons why I look for portrayals of non-binary morality now, is because I grew up on He-Man, which had exactly 0 of those. So however, Kevin Smith kind of revived the series with Masters of the Universe Revelation. It's just out within the last year, and kind of flipped the whole thing on his head and centered the show around Evil Lynn rather than He-Man, and kind of got lambasted by the fan base because of that. I loved it. I thought it was one of the most worthy things that he could have done with the series. So and Evil Lynn plays a very conflicted, definitely not evil character. So anyway, that's my favorite animated, other than Centaurworld. Centaurworld actually is my favorite animated series. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, both of those answers are great. Those are both really great series. My gosh, this is a tough one. I really love there's an anime series called Nichijou. I think the translation is My Ordinary Life, and it is about a group of 4 schoolgirls, and it's a slice of life comedy, but it is so surreal and bonkers. And the animators had clearly had so much fun making this show. And it's so many, it's hard to describe. It's like a lot of little sketches, but it's really funny and weird and dramatic how they take basic drama between these characters, or just like there's certain ordinary relatable scenarios that just turn into these big epic and really hilarious vignettes. And that's a show that I really enjoy. I'm sure there are places to find it online, but
yeah, I'm sure there are. Yeah, I'll ask my brother and my sister-in-law. They love anime, so I'm sure that they'll be able to tell me.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway,
so you were big into music, and that was a big part of Centaurworld's musical. So I guess, what's your favorite live action musical? I guess I'll say mine would have to be, just because it's the only thing I've seen on Broadway live, and some of the reasons behind it. But Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is probably my favorite musical because of that. And
cool.
I will say that, certainly. Mr. Sal, I know, is also really into musicals and theater in general.
Yeah, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of musical theater. I've watched a lot of musical theater. My favorite musical is Avenue Q. I don't know if you've ever heard or seen that. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with an IV of Muppets into my arm. So and Sesame Street, and so it came out when I was in my early 20s, and it's about several characters who are in their early 20s, and you can clearly see that the intent was, when we were little, Sesame Street kind of told us how to do things, and we don't have that anymore, so we need a Sesame Street for adults. And so that's what it ended up being. And I got to play the main character Princeton in a community theater production of it, and
awesome.
I've got a really special connection with that show. So Avenue Q is amazing. I love it.
Yeah, that's a great choice. Muppets were a huge inspiration for Centaurworld too.
I know.
Most of the Centaurworld characters, it's very clear they were super Muppety. And
yep.
Glendale in particular is pure Muppet, down to the voice, kind of. But it's genuinely difficult for me to pick a favorite musical because I love so many of them. I think that the one that was really, I guess, my favorite went from when I was younger, or the one that kind of like really sparked my interest in musical theater was probably Les Miserables. And I remember watching the 10th anniversary concert on PBS, and it was amazing. And Lea Salonga played Eponine on it.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and I was so it was amazing to get her as a part of the cast, because she's also like animation royalty. Like she's been like the singing voice for 2 Disney princesses. She was Jasmine, she was Mulan, and also, I mean, like I remember rewatching that PBS special. Like I taped it and rewatched it, and like, because I'm Asian American, and seeing an Asian woman play this character, and it was really powerful to watch that. I know like a lot of other people in our cast also fangirl over Leia, so it was like a big deal for us personally to get her to be a part of it. And she was amazing, and nice and so professional. And so that was it. Probably Les Mis. It was like one that just really imprinted on my brain when I was younger.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great show. That's actually the first show I saw on Broadway. So that's amazing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was awesome. It was awesome. Well, we can start thinking about wrapping things up here, and except I think Kirt has one more.
Yeah, we've got one final question for you if you're down.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, one final question. Me and Mr. Sal, we've had an argument. We've had a few arguments. You've cleared up some things between us. This is one. It's constant. I'm sick of it. So, which is the best host, the favorite host of Show Hoppers?
Oh,
I'm gonna pick the chalk answer here. I'll pick the chalk one. I think I am. It's me.
And I think I am. So chalk. So you have to break the tie.
I have the chalk though. Yours is not the chalk.
Okay. Well, no, you do not have to break this tie, Megan. But
I was gonna compliment both of you on this wholesome dynamic. I mean, the fact that like so so Kurt, you were a student in his
Sadly,
class?
yeah.
Okay.
no,
No, it was very fun. Yes, I was a student in his class. 4 years ago, it's the last time I had him as a teacher.
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can't pick a favorite in this,
No,
or I
it's
can't
okay.
pick a,
It's okay.
I cannot say that one of you is better than the other. I made a show about, about found family and about characters that come like, so I'm not going to pick a favorite.
No, we appreciate that because I think I might lose, so I don't want to lose.
No.
It's
a risk I'm willing to take.
Yeah, so yeah, Kurt was a student in my class 2 years in a row, actually, in his junior year and his senior year. So
I didn't fail. It was two different classes.
2 different classes. Yes, sir.
I wouldn't have guessed that you would have, unless you did so on purpose because you liked his class.
Oh yeah, maybe. Oh,
that would have been an acceptable answer as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if you would like that though. Would you like that yourself?
No, Kurt was a remarkable student. So it was,
Awesome.
it was really nice to reconnect with him afterwards. And we've now recorded almost, I think over now 200 episodes together. So I spend more time with Kurt than I spend with my actual family, I think. So Kurt has certainly found family, so for sure. So yeah. Anyway, is there anything that you're working on right now, or anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, like there's nothing really else that I'd like to promote. I think, yeah, just any more eyeballs we could get on Centaurworld is always great. I'm really happy that it's on a platform where it's going to be there in perpetuity. And yeah, the only thing I can think to promote is just to promote Centaurworld and to promote the show. And we really had an amazing team that worked on it. And I think I'm really proud of how it looks and sounds. And yeah, so that's the only thing I can think to promote. Okay. Otherwise, yeah, I hope you guys have recorded 200 episodes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a Centaurworld, but yeah.
Not a
No, I know. No, this is great. I hope you guys just keep making more.
Yeah, we certainly plan to. This was birthed out of COVID and Better Call Saul, actually, but which starts next week. So at any rate, yeah. So do you have any other questions for us or anything?
We've
kind of put you on the spot. So if you want to put us on the spot a little bit, that's okay.
That wasn't the plan.
Oh gosh, I have to quiz you guys. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Moose Tracks, easy. Moose Tracks.
That was fast.
Yeah, that was really fast.
I love ice cream. I love it. Soft serve I prefer, but yeah, for being like a tub.
Yeah, I cookie dough, chocolate chip cookie dough.
What about you, Megan?
Ooh, I shouldn't have asked this question. Mint chip.
Yeah, that's a good one.
No.
Interestingly, I just bought 3 half gallons of ice cream for one of my classes last week, and mint chip was the first one gone. So that was the popular one. So you're in good company. Okay, we do have one more thing from my other son Hugo that he wants to say to you. So if you would indulge us for one more audio file.
Hugo, is there anything you would like to say to or ask the creator of Centaurworld, who is also the voice of Glendale?
I love you.
He is 6.5. It's really been interesting.
That's so sweet.
He's a sweet kid. Yeah. It's been interesting watching this series with Kurt, because I feel like me watching with Kurt is very similar to my older son watching with my younger son, because my older son Griffin is the big comfortable Doug guy. He always looks for the humor, and that's a lot of what Kirt does. He kind of, really highlights the humor of the series. And Hugo, my younger son, is extremely emotionally intelligent and looks for the depths that you might miss on first or cursory viewing. So and that's more in line with the way I watch it as well. So it's been really fun watching with them. But when he says he loves you, he really does love you. He doesn't really know you, but he really does.
Yeah. No, this has been amazing, and it's been awesome to kind of hear, like your different perspectives on it.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like to hear like kind of the way that your family has been watching it as well, too, or just it's really cool, because we were kind of, like when you're working on a production, you're kind of making it in a bubble, and you're making it trying to make everyone else laugh on the crew. So you kind of have this family that you're kind of working with, and you just hope it resonates with somebody out there. So yeah, thank you for also sharing the feedback from your family as well.
Oh, of course. And seriously, just full of gratitude for the series, for your time, sharing your time with us today. Really highlights what a wonderful person you certainly must be. So thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for creating this important series.